Tonight, we're opening a tomb that just refuses to stay sealed. We're talking about a man whose death was, well, maybe the greatest mystery he ever left behind. Let's dive in.
So picture this. It's 1541. We're in Salzburg, and inside the quiet White Horse Inn, a man named Paracelsus takes his very last breath. Now, for most people, that's a pretty definitive end. But for a man like him, his legend was just getting started.
And here's where it gets wild. This is the master of the elixir of life, the guy who basically promised to cheat death itself, and he dies at the young age of 48. For his followers, that just didn't add up. It wasn't an end, it was a total contradiction, one so big they just refused to believe it.
To really get what happened next, we can't start with a dry fact. We've got to start with a story, a kind of parable that perfectly frames the whole mystery of his disappearance. Let's call it the parable of the empty shroud.
Imagine a whole city gathering to mourn its greatest inventor. This guy was a clockmaker who swore he could conquer time itself by building a perpetual machine. He was a genius, a rebel, and now, apparently, he was gone.
So, the townspeople force their way into his workshop, expecting to find, well, but what they find is even stranger. Everything is perfectly in its place, tools arranged with care, but his traveling coat is gone. Kinda weird, don't you think?
The workshop was just empty. No note, no struggle, just a void where a great man used to be. And then the rumors started. Some folks swore they saw him hiking up towards the mountains, looking healthier than ever. Others had this wild idea that he'd somehow dissolved into the gears of his own masterpiece.
And you've probably guessed it, that clockmaker, that's our guy Paracelsus. For his most devoted followers, his death wasn't a failure to find the elixir of life. Oh no. It was proof that he had succeeded. His empty tomb was simply the laboratory of his final and most incredible experiment in transformation.
But look, not everyone was buying this magical explanation, right? The first, and honestly the most brutal story that started making the rounds was that Paracelsus didn't just disappear. He was taken out.
And right away, two competing theories popped up. On one side, you have this brutal public attack, assassins, hired by the jealous doctors he loved to publicly humiliate, cornering him in a dark alley and fracturing his skull, a theory that forensic exams later seemed to support. On the other side, a much sneakier plot, that he was slowly poisoned with mercury, a victim of the very elements he claimed to have mastered.
In the end, it almost didn't matter if he was actually murdered. The story of his murder, that was the powerful thing. It turned him from just another casualty into a martyr for progress, a rebel so threatening to the old guard that he had to be silenced. And with a story like that, his legend became bulletproof.
Okay, so murder was one story, but it wasn't the only story. Because if he didn't really die, then maybe, just maybe, he was still out there.
So, in the decades after 1541, you start hearing these whispers, tales trickling in from tiny villages across Europe and beyond. Stories of a wandering doctor in a leather apron, an ageless man who could cure the incurable, just appearing out of nowhere.
These eyewitnesses described someone who seemed to carry the weight of centuries, who spoke with this ancient authority. This wasn't just some skilled physician they were seeing. This was Paracelsus, the myth, made flesh and blood once more.
His followers even had a name for this whole thing. They called it pseudo-immortality. The idea was that he'd finally created the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary Azoth, a substance that didn't just turn lead to gold, but made its creator indestructible. His death then was just a clever trick, a way to watch over his art from the shadows.
So we've got murder, we've got a fake death, but wait, there's a third theory. This one is less about alchemy and more spiritual, and it was championed by one of history's most mysterious secret societies, the Rosicrucians.
Yeah, so for the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, Paracelsus was one of their own, one of the greats. They believed he never died at all, he merely transitioned. In their lore, his tomb in Salzburg is just a symbol for the uninitiated. They say his body ascended to a secret mountain sanctuary, where he became a silent, immortal observer, a guardian of profound secrets.
Okay, so we've got murder, a fake death, and spiritual ascension. Pretty wild stuff. But what if his real immortality is something else entirely? Something far more revolutionary? What if his great experiment was never about his body at all?
Just look at what happened after he was supposedly gone. By the 1600s, his ideas, the same ones people had laughed at, were sweeping through Europe's top universities. His chemical remedies, once seen as heresy, were being added to official medical books in London and Venice. The real apparition of Paracelsus wasn't a man walking through villages, it was the unstoppable presence of his ideas in every laboratory.
And that's really the heart of it. Paracelsus did achieve immortality, not with a magical stone or by ascending a mountain. He did it by launching a revolution that outlived him and continues to shape the way we think about medicine to this very day.
So, when you get right down to it, does it really matter if his bones are in St. Sebastian's or if he's wandering some alpine peak? The legends are just decorations on a much, much greater truth.
Ultimately, his life's work left us with this powerful message. The true elixir of life isn't a substance you can drink. It's the relentless, unending quest for knowledge. That is the only thing that truly grants eternal life.
Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The corpse of Paracelsus might be in a tomb, but his spirit, that rebellious, world-changing spirit of inquiry, is still very much alive. So I'll ask you, if an idea can never be buried, can its creator ever truly die?